This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Council of American Ambassadors Roundtable discussion with the Estonian Ambassador to the United States. I'm Kathleen Sheehan, the Executive Director of the Council. I have two brief housekeeping notes. One, that we are recording today's event and it will be posted on our website afterwards so that those people who are not able to attend live can attend later. And second, we strongly encourage questions from the audience. There's two ways to submit questions. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. Or when we come to the Q&A portion, you can click your raise your hand button and we can unmute you and then you can just speak your question to the ambassador. And so with that, it is my honor to turn the podium over to Council Director, Ambassador Aldona Vosh, who herself was the US Ambassador to Estonia in 2004 to 2006. So Ambassador Vosh, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, welcome to the Ambassadors Roundtable. And I would like to take this opportunity to first and foremost thank Kathleen and to thank her for her dedication, for her successful work as an Executive Director at the Council of American Ambassadors. And we all wish her the very, very best as she returns back to the State Department. So Kathleen, congratulations. We're sorry you're leaving, and I'm sure the State Department is ecstatic that you're coming back. So thank you. So today I have the pleasure of introducing the Estonian Ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Kristjan Prikk. Ambassador Prikk has served as Estonia's ambassador to the United States since May of 2021. This is his third diplomatic posting to Washington. Before assuming his current duties, he served as the permanent secretary of the Estonian Ministry of Defense. And in this role, he was responsible for the management of the ministry and for the coordination of the activities of the Estonian Defense Forces, the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service, and the Center for Defense Systems. Prior to that, Ambassador Prikk worked as the Undersecretary for Defense Policies in the Ministry of Defense. Prior to that, he was Director of National Security and Defense Coordination Unit, coordinating and developing and the implementation of the whole of government interagency approach to the national defense of Estonia, and of course advising the Prime Minister. His previous assignments, including service as defense counselor at the Estonian Embassy here in DC. Prior to joining the Ministry of Defense, Ambassador Prikk worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on NATO issues pertaining to its enlargement and its partnership with Russia, the Ukraine, and Georgia. Ambassador Prikk holds a master's degree from the Strategic Studies program of the United States Army War College and a bachelor's degree in political science and economics from the University of Tartu. And of note, I thought it was extremely interesting, he currently remains as a reserve officer and is also a member of the Estonian Voluntary Defense Organization, Kaitseliit, which is the Estonian Defense League. So, Ambassador Prikk, you have extensive experience and knowledge. So your presentation could not possibly be timelier than today, considering the German Chancellor is in Washington speaking to President Biden. So we are very much looking forward to hearing how Estonia views the current European security crisis. So thank you, and Ambassador Prikk.
Thank you, Ambassador Voss. I hope my voice comes through, and
yes,
and we can go forward. Thank you again very much, and thank you for this very too kind introduction. But I'll try to start with my notes. I expect to talk about 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm certainly open for any questions the distinguished listeners may have, so that there are no taboo issues, at least from my side. And again, I'd very much like to thank also the organization, the Council of American Ambassadors, for giving me this very unique opportunity to talk and present our views of the current security crisis in Europe. So. Firstly, I would like to state that this crisis does not come from nowhere, or this crisis should not be a complete surprise to anyone who has been paying attention to European security matters and who have paid attention to particularly Russian foreign and security policy and the different claims and demands that have been presented over the years. There are two aspects to it. Firstly, are the Russian claims and grievances regarding Ukraine, and there is a very clear track record when we pay attention to, for example, President Putin's different statement that he has delivered pretty much since he became the president more than 20 years ago, but certainly since around 10 years ago. There has been a constant theme of doubting the Ukrainian nation's right to be an independent nation, and their claim to having a sovereign independent state. Secondly, there are wider-reaching sort of claims and grievances that Russia has presented over the years, but certainly again since around 2009, when then Foreign Minister and current Foreign Minister Lavrov came out with a proposal for sort of redrafting or redesigning European security. So many of these issues have been sort of dormant and have been brushed under the carpet, but they have been around for some time. Now, in this context, it's certainly important to also make the note that this may sound controversial or paradoxical, but this crisis, on the one hand, is very much about Ukraine, but on the other hand, it's not just about Ukraine. The current Russian leadership certainly sees Ukraine as part of their Russia's vital interests, and considers bringing Ukraine sort of back to the Russian orbit, if not back to Russia, as something that is almost an obsession, I would claim. At least that's what comes out of several writings and statements that President Putin and some people from his inner circle have made, but even more from some of the statements that they've said behind the closed doors. So one of the themes that they are using or repeating is that for them Ukraine is an unfinished business. But on the other hand, again, as I said before, and which is definitely proven by the nature and content of recent letters that Russian leadership has sent to the US, to NATO, and to individual members of OSCE, that it's also about wider sort of redrafting or redesigning of European security. It's not just limited to the question of Ukraine. Now, in this context, in the context of this crisis, I would argue that there are positive elements that we can witness thus far, and there are certainly negative elements. I would start with positive. Firstly, from the very beginning, when this crisis started to escalate on the sort of political arena or in the political domain, I guess one of the important miscalculations that the Russian leadership made was to assume that the U.S. administration would be willing to and going to negotiate with Russia alone over the heads of allies, and I guess the U.S. refusal to just deal with this crisis as something that should be dealt with, or that should be solved as a bilateral U.S.-Russian matter, was the first source of frustration for Kremlin. Stemming from that, what has certainly been also positive for U.S. and allies is the, I would say, unprecedented level of engagement between the allies and the U.S. In very different formats. It's been entire NATO. It's been some regional formats. There has been a lot of bilateral cooperation. In any case, at least I personally, with my slim 22 years of experience in Estonian Foreign Service, have not seen anything close to that before, and certainly also my colleagues who have many more years experience have not seen anything like that either. And thirdly, a positive aspect that in a way is very much linked to the first two is that allies really have stayed united in the face of this challenge to the European security order, and in the challenge of Russian very aggressive, or in the face of Russian very aggressive behavior. So this is the three positive aspects that I would like to point out in the context of this crisis. Now the negative part. There's one major point, but this major point is in a way overwhelming. This is that despite all the efforts, despite all the attention that this crisis has received, again, I would argue that this is pretty much unprecedented. In 1962, when the Cuba missile crisis took place, then we didn't have the media. We didn't have the media. We didn't have the communication means like we have today. So, despite all this unprecedented attention to this crisis, there are no signs of de-escalation right now. No signs in the political domain. No signs of in the military domain. Or I would argue that the current situation points to quite the opposite. In the political domain, we've seen Russian officials repeatedly raising the same demands or making the same ultimatums, which point to the grievances that are either completely made up or are just very much pulled out of context. For example, when they point out the changed force posture of NATO on its eastern flank, then Russia never admits that this has been a response to Russian own behavior, Russian aggressive attacks against its neighbors. And what's also very important in this political domain is that whereas President Putin for a couple of weeks stayed silent on these issues and on these demands, just end of last week he made it very clear that that Russian positions presented in those letters and presented by lower level officials are very much also his views, and he doesn't have any intention to sort of withdraw from these positions. And on the military side, we've seen during the last couple of weeks only developments that sort of prove the assessments and predictions that the intelligence had told us several months ago. We see more sort of gaps being filled on this Russian force posture on the border of Ukraine and also in Ukraine, in Crimea. But I would point out a very important development that is different from, let's say, last spring, what is different from 2014. Russia now has a really considerable military contingent also in Belarus. And Belarus has been effectively turned into a Russian tool. We don't believe that Belarusian authorities have independence or freedom in really deciding on where, when, and under what circumstances Russia deploys its forces. So Russia can use also Belarusian territory in the build-up against Ukraine, and also in the coercive build-up or coercive signaling against NATO. So I have, I think, 3 minutes left. So I would now point out 4 areas where we think we should either stay true to the current positions or move ahead in a way. So this is the sort of what to do in this situation paragraph. So firstly, I guess the basis for any success from our point of view, the basis for really coming out of this crisis, certainly not weaker than we were, is political unity, to stay true to core principles that firstly, of course, our societies have accepted when they decided the way our countries should be run and so on, but also to stay true to the principles that we have jointly defined to describe the principles of security in Europe, and very importantly, stay true also to the principle that when it comes to NATO collective defense pledge and how to arrange the collective defense, or how to make sure that it works both politically as well as militarily. This is something that the NATO allies can do or have to do between each other, rather than third countries telling us. Secondly, we have to continue to support Ukraine, both politically with statements, visits, other means, and certainly also by helping them economically and militarily to maintain and build up their resilience. Thirdly, we have to increase the costs for potential aggression. part of it is again helping the Ukrainians with military assistance, for example, so that any military incursion is met with serious response, and hopefully this will be factored in any of the decision calculus by the Russians. And secondly, the sanction package that should be strong and immediately recognizable across the board from the North American allies as well as from European allies. And last point, we have to make sure that also NATO force posture on its eastern flank is adjusted or is actually reflecting the current realities on the eastern flank. The fact that NATO collective defense has worked for 70+ years is great, but we have to make sure that no one miscalculates our resolve and ability to collectively defend each other also today and in today's circumstances. So this is my very short sort of assessment or description of our thinking in this situation, and I would be very happy to answer to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. That was intriguing to hear your thoughts. Kathleen, do we have any questions, or should I just start with the first one?
I don't have any questions in yet, so why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Ambassador Prikk, I am actually intrigued, having had the privilege of living and working in Estonia. What actually has changed with NATO since the unrest in 2014 in the Donbass region and the invasion of Crimea? Because at that time, we were all hearing here in the United States that countries such as Estonia would be the next to be invaded. And currently, we don't hear that loudly. So my question is, what has changed with NATO? And the follow-up question to that, how scared are the Estonians?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ambassador. Excellent questions. What has happened with NATO is that NATO has, in many ways and many respects, gone back to the roots, while staying also current in the context of today's and future challenges, like paying attention to the emerging and what's the other word? Anyway, the new technologies, as well as paying more attention to the challenge of China. NATO has taken it very seriously. Has taken very seriously the fact that Russian actions on the eastern border of NATO have become more aggressive. That there's a lot of military development, a lot of exercises that are geared clearly against NATO countries, individually and NATO collectively. So NATO is much better in making sure that the defense and deterrence also on the eastern flank actually works. So you were completely right when you pointed out that in 2014 the frequent question was, is Estonia next, or quite often the question referred to the easternmost Estonian city, the city of Narva. Is Narva next? That lies right on the Russian border. This time, I'm happy to report that I've not received this question, is Narva next, from a single journalist yet, and I think that this shows that there's a more sort of ingrained understanding that there's a very clear difference between NATO members and between countries that are not part of NATO. Now, when you asked about the attitudes of Estonians, this is again, I guess, the the case where we can claim that NATO has certainly done certain things right. In 2014, the sentiment among the general public was really sort of, people were frightened. People seriously talked about either joining the resistance movement if it's necessary, or how to get their families abroad and things like that. So this is not the case anymore. People are seeing the NATO resolve and collective defense actively being improved and in work, so to say, on a day in and day out.
Thank you. And I see we have a question from one of the participants. I cannot read who it is from, but the question states, Estonia has unique skills in cybersecurity. Is Estonia providing technical assistance to Ukraine in this area? And is Russia cyber attacking Ukraine now?
Thank you. On cybersecurity and technical assistance to Ukraine, the short answer is yes, we are partnering with Ukrainian authorities to help them when and where needed. The slightly longer answer is that we have done it for years. So we've worked with them to build up the resilience of their networks, both civilian as well as some other networks, for several years, and we are continuing to do that. Is Russia cyber attacking Ukraine now? I'm not a cyber expert myself, certainly, but what I've heard from people who probably can be called experts is that there are daily attacks, that some of them are just for probing, some of them are maybe getting through, but most of them we never hear about. So I guess that's the proper characterization of the situation.
And just thank you. That was from Ambassador Sedgwick. That was from Todd. Thank you for identifying yourself. And just in case someone of our colleagues does not know, the Cybersecurity Center of Excellence is in Estonia for NATO. So that is just for general knowledge for everyone. And NATO certainly has been at the head of the class when it comes to cybersecurity, as we all witnessed a few years ago in 2006 as over a statue, the entire country was just about shut down. Ambassador Prikk, perhaps I have another question. Could you comment on Europeans' energy strategy? And there are several questions I have to that. Is there anything that can still be done to stop Nord Stream 2? Then what about the other pipelines, Russian pipelines, the Druzhba oil pipeline, the Brotherhood pipeline? So those are all pipelines that are going currently and to Austria, the Czech Republic, to Hungary, to Slovakia. If you can kind of comment on the entire energy strategy right now.
Thank you again for a very timely question. Just today, there is a meeting between EU and US senior officials on energy matters, so-called US EU Energy Council. And I think when it comes to this energy dependencies and relying on these different pipelines, and there are very few short-term fixes, so to say. What the EU officials as well as US officials are doing together right now is, as they call it, hunting for molecules, because right now the most serious crisis, and with the potential of getting even more serious, is related to the deficit in the natural gas market. So I think this year, for many reasons, not only because of the crisis in Ukraine, but also for the reason that the electricity prices that are related to gas burning power stations, for example, electricity prices have shot up considerably in the EU. In my country, for example, in December, the electricity prices were close to 4- or 5-fold compared to what they were a year ago. So people have really woken up to some of the vulnerabilities that our economies have, and the issue of supply security. So in the short term, I guess the solution is to just try to hunt as many of those molecules outside of Europe, but also inside of Europe. Use the oil fields and the gas depositories as much as we can. We know that Norway, Netherlands have increased their own production of gas, and particularly natural gas. We also think that in some cases we just have to switch the coal burning power stations on if natural gas market becomes restrictively expensive. But in the longer term, we believe we just have to get rid of the dependency, this excessive dependency to Russian fuels, and to make sure that they don't have the capacity to influence political decisions in Europe by just switching off the gas pipelines or oil pipelines whenever they want. On the Nord Stream 2, I believe you asked this question. It is very much in the hands of the current German government and their regulators. I expect that there will be a statement coming out of the meeting between the German Chancellor and President today, but I wouldn't like to predict what exactly they're going to say about that. Estonia has never been a supporter of this pipeline. We have held the view from the very beginning, actually from the time the first pipeline was built, Nord Stream 1, that it's not an economic project, but it's rather designed to be a political lever.
Thank you. And I encourage, if you have any other questions, then please let us know. And Kathleen or Grace, if you see.
Yeah, I have.
Yes,
there's a couple of questions here that follow on your discussion of Germany. A couple of people have said, how do you read and assess the attitude of Germany with its new SPD-led government in the context of the NATO solidarity and unity that you have previously described?
Maybe I should use this overexploited sentence, too early to tell, that allegedly was used when assessing the effects of the French Revolution, right? Anyway, the German government has only started. Certainly, with new coalition governments, every country has its own issues where they have to deal with the issues that they may not have thought about when signing the coalition agreements, or not at least in the sense that they have to immediately start to solve the crisis on these particular issues. We have been repeatedly assured by the German diplomats, by German higher officials that Germany sticks to solidarity with the rest of the allies, and when it comes to raising the costs for Russians in the case of aggression, that they will not be showstoppers. Now, again, I hope that today's statement from the President and Chancellor will give more details on where exactly they stand vis-a-vis the different possible sanctions.
Kathleen?
Sure. Here's a question from Ambassador Tom Korologos. He says, given that Estonia is just a couple of countries away from Ukraine, has there been any Russian military activity outside Estonia and the Baltics?
The fact is that that at this point Russia has either already moved or will move shortly by far great majority of its active duty military forces to the border of Ukraine. I guess this fact in itself also speaks volumes about the seriousness of Russian grievances regarding NATO, so to say, circulating it. So in reality, they are easily taking this risk of pulling the forces from where NATO is to its non-NATO neighbors borders. So we have seen rather troops being deployed from the vicinity of Estonia or from the general area of Estonia to Ukrainian borders. However, as I mentioned before, this deployment of thousands of Russian troops to Belarus is significant to the entire region of the Baltic states. Even though Estonia is not bordering Belarus, what deployment to Belarus allows the Russians to do, if they want to, is to turn the, let's say, NATO Baltic Peninsula, Baltic states as a peninsula stretching from the rest of NATO, turn this peninsula into an island by closing the so-called Suwalki Gap or Suwalki Corridor, basically the narrow stretch between Belarus and Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. And if that were to happen, then NATO would face an incredibly difficult situation to enact the collective defense clause and to deploy any reinforcements to the area, because land corridor is gone, and when it comes to air and sea, then Russia has quite effective tools to impose so-called anti-access area denial in the Baltic region.
Here's another question. I can't see who it's from, but it says President Biden has stated that U.S. troops will not be deployed into Ukraine, but you have alluded to a military response in addition to economic sanctions. What type of military response do you envision if the U.S. won't deploy troops into Ukraine?
Yeah, I'd like to be very clear on that. Just as President Biden has not talked about sending U.S. troops to Ukraine, we have not talked about sending Estonian troops to or U.S. troops for that matter to Ukraine either. But when it comes to the military tools, then there are two. Firstly, provide military assistance to Ukrainians so that they can defend themselves, or if necessary, of course, we would hope that deterrence works and they don't have to fight another aggression. And secondly, make sure that the alliance force posture on the eastern flank is compatible with the changed circumstances, so that we have a deterrence and defense posture that clearly signals the credibility of the collective defense.
Here's a question from Ambassador Louise Oliver. Could you please discuss the Minsk Protocol, Minsk II, and the Normandy format, and what role will these play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I have to admit that the Minsk protocols and the Normandy format is something where people who really know this every nuance of these documents and every nuance of these interactions, I guess they already can be called sort of school of science, or these people really know it, and unfortunately I'm not the person who knows the details of these documents by heart. But basically they were the Minsk agreements were the ones that at least hibernated the conflict in Donbass, and gave way to the argument that, or made the argument possible that there is now a diplomatic process that will solve the existing conflict. Now we are many years away from Minsk protocols, and the conflict is anything but solved. The problem is that there is a very different interpretation on how exactly these responsibilities of different sides should be treated. What's the sequence of different sides sort of carrying out their commitments according to these protocols, and even the matter whether Russia has anything to do in this particular conflict, or the Ukrainians should only negotiate with the so-called how to call it, the Donbass authorities, who we know very well are under the full control of Russian Federation. So these issues, these arguments have not made it possible to actually solve this problem. The Ukrainians, for example, have been staunchly opposing the interpretation whereby the elections in the occupied areas could be held before this area is disarmed and before Ukrainian government can actually hold any control over the area. I think for any government, that kind of proposal would be almost suicidal. But this is one of the issues that that they have been discussing now recently. Germany and France, that are parties to this Normandy 4, so to say, in addition to Ukraine and Russia, have made efforts and seemingly successfully to revitalize and reconvene this format. They met, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and possibly they're going to meet again in the coming days at the level of prime ministers or presidential advisors, and we'll see whether something comes out of that. But at least what the assessment of Germans and the French is that 80% of the efforts that they make are or 80% of energy they spend on getting the Russians behind the table at all, and then 20% of energy goes to discussing things.
My understanding,
go ahead.
just wanted to interject. My understanding is that the French president is in Moscow today, and
Yes.
then traveling to Kiev tomorrow in that line, and that the German chancellor, of course, is in DC today, and will be heading towards Moscow from subsequently after that.
Yes, and where, as far as the French president's mission to Moscow is concerned, it's clear that he has, let's say, different hats there. That he's part of this Normandy 4. So certainly this Normandy and the Minsk agreements is one of the angles that he can approach the issue. But then again, France is for this 6 months up until July, the president, or they are holding the rotational presidency of the EU also. So certainly the EU angle is strongly represented there as well.
Ambassador Laurie Fulton had a question with regard to France, and she said that, again, since French President Macron is meeting with Putin today, what do you expect will be the outcome of that meeting?
You know, I run the risk of saying something and then discovering that the meeting results have already been published by some Western or Russian news outlets, and I'm trying to speculate over something that is already common knowledge. So I'm trying to avoid the speculation. We know that Paris is very much interested in trying to find some kind of diplomatic off-ramp in this situation, and certainly trying different ways and using different persons to establish this diplomatic off-ramp is useful. However, I don't have any solid information on the actual availability of this off-ramp at this point.
There's one more question in the Q&A box, Ambassador Vosch. It is just sort of the big overarching question. That is, in your expert opinion, how do you think this crisis will end?
Yeah, I'm not trying even to pretend that I have more information or a better assessment of the near future than anyone else, and I'm sure with this very distinguished audience, every one of you can construct a very plausible end state of this crisis. What I'm saying though is that very typical to an authoritarian ruler, President Putin still at this point has pretty much all the options open for him. So I wouldn't rule out anything from him pulling back the forces and declaring that he was successful and that's the end of this crisis, to a very unfortunate major military conflict. I would not speculate on the way he may be using the military force. What might be the military objectives of this particular or potential military operation. What I can say though is that our assessment of what he could do with the military tool that he has amassed on the border is very similar to the U.S. assessment. That at this point Russian armed forces would be capable of starting a major military operation on a very short notice from different military directions, from eastern, northern and southern part of Ukraine, and if the political leadership decides the military objective of let's say threatening and attacking Kiev, if they consider this as a necessary military objective, then they have the tools at hand that can be used for that. And particularly in this context, I would again emphasize the role of Russian troops in Belarus that can be used for threatening and, if necessary, attacking also Kiev and key critical infrastructure of Russians. But as I said before, our assessment is also that if Mr. Putin decides that the price is too high and decides to pull back Russian forces, then this can be done without facing the problem that any democratic leader would face in this situation. The problem of saving face or explaining his or her own people how come that this operation or this military political operation turned out that way. He won't have that kind of problem. He can pull back and declare that he has achieved all the objectives.
Ambassador Prikk, so on hopefully a more positive note, what do you think that NATO, specifically the United States, can still do to de-escalate the situation?
We are of a view that we have to stay very firm we have to make sure that these ultimatums are both in their substance as well as in their style are just unacceptable, and that we are not going to sort of give in an inch where this would require betraying our principles and our partners and allies. But then again, we have to be very candid that when it comes to, for example, increased transparency in military exercises, when it comes to possibly negotiating on the terms of shorter range missiles, in placement of these missiles in Europe or different regions of that. If we talk about implementing properly the existing arms control regimes and possibly coming up with some new transparency measures, we are absolutely on board, and we hope we can then convince the Russians that the price of further escalation is just too high, but on the other hand, they can get something out of this more transparency and more predictability vis-a-vis NATO that we are willing to offer on a reciprocal basis, of course.
Thank you. And Kathleen, do we have any other questions?
No, there's no further questions.
Then, Ambassador, perhaps I can ask the last one, and it is obviously premature on this question, but if Russia does not invade the Ukraine, how does NATO position itself facing towards the future to stabilize the region?
Yeah, that's a really good one. My thinking, and actually that this is absolutely right to think already past this current crisis, not only think of the current situation. But my thinking is that we have to take some really honest lessons learned from this crisis, and also assess if and in whatever way this crisis ends, what's the risk of similar crisis of reappearing again. No one wants to see a situation where we're going to have a similar escalation every 6 to 8 months, and we have to deal with the same crisis. So unless there is some miracle commitment followed by very concrete steps that would convince us that won't happen, or that won't be possible to happen in the near future again, I think we all have to sort of strengthen our own political and military sort of resolve to make sure that there are no miscalculations, and these kind of escalations are just not worth the resources spent on that, both political resources as well as military and financial resources.
Well, with that, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Prikk, for your time and for a very insightful presentation. I also would like to thank Kathleen, and once again, wish her the very best going back to the State Department. And to welcome Grace as your first day at work behind the scenes. So to both Kathleen and Grace, thank you for putting this together. To the audience, I thank you very much. Thank you to my colleagues for joining us and for your questions. And may everyone have a good afternoon and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, ambassadors, and I would really like to thank everyone who joined today. And if you have any further questions, you know how to reach me at the Estonian Embassy. Thank you.
Thank you.